Hey everyone, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome to the ZEISS Global Glaucoma Meeting 2020, and I'm coming to you live from Portland, Oregon today. And I have with me my co-presenter for today's event, Chris Panos. Chris, how you doing?
Hi, fine. Hi, Adam. How are you? How are
I
you
am
keeping?
I am doing great, and you are coming to us from London. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Wow,
Central London.
excellent. Well, it's funny. This is the very first time we are doing an international event and live stream. So I just wanted to thank you for being here and thank everyone for showing up today because this is really exciting stuff. We have people registered for the event from all over the globe, and this is a first for us. So it should be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Adam. It should be brilliant. I mean, we have a lot of things to sort of talk about. I mean, my interest, as you know, is glaucoma and especially new technologies and new treatments in glaucoma. And we're going to be having, I understand, the live stream where people would be tortured by us, and then you will have also the educational sessions, which are in two different streams, I think.
Yeah, so let me actually pull it up here so people can see what we're talking about. So, Chris, I'm really glad to have you here with us today because you're obviously an expert in glaucoma, right? This is you've made your life glaucoma, and so it's great to have you here because this meeting is going to get into some cool new developments. We have two educational tracks going on in addition to the live stream. So one about optimizing your glaucoma practice, and another track about the advancing technologies in glaucoma, right? And so you can see the different lectures that we have coming up on the screen right now. And we're going to be interviewing a bunch of the folks who are giving these talks as well and get some of their insights. So it's going to be a really fun day. And before we get started, though, I'd like to just sort of, obviously, we know you're a glaucoma specialist, and again, you're going to be helping guide the discussion today and speak with all the clinicians. Just for folks who may not know me, because I just realized, this is an international audience. People may not have, seen me before. So I'm Adam Farkas. I actually run ODWire and CEWire here in the United States. So ODWire is the largest social network for eye care practitioners. We've been doing it for about 20 years. And CEWire is the largest online continuing education conference for eye care practitioners. We've been doing that for about 5. This year, of course, obviously with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, suddenly we became much higher profile, and suddenly we were also catering to an international audience. So I'm certain a few people here at least will have taken some of our classes. But welcome to everyone. I hope you get a lot out of this today. And Chris, let me just pull that up again so people can see again what's going on. So if you don't want to hear us blabbing away, starting very soon, you have the keynotes and the live sessions starting. So feel free to pop in there. There's also an exhibit hall, and I shouldn't fail to mention it. The event today has an exhibit hall where you can look at all of ZEISS's different products, and not just look at them and play videos on them and look at white papers and so forth, but ZEISS's staff is also standing by to answer your questions via text chat, which is a really cool thing. When we first started doing this, I always wondered, I asked myself, is it really a good substitute for being there in person? And it's different, right? Because you can't actually feel the equipment, you can't really see how it all works, but what you can do is get the attention of the folks at ZEISS very easily and get your questions
Yeah, that's
answered in a
true.
hurry versus going to something like Vision Expo where it can be like, a big crowd and really difficult. So, yeah.
No, I mean, obviously the different thing is that you can't obviously be looking at people, looking at or getting the feel of how it is normally when you are sort of in a big exhibition hall, But actually, I think that this is it comes pretty close. Actually, it comes pretty close as an experience. I think so. People, I think, will be quite happy seeing what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a more of a reflective environment, right? You can actually sit back and think a little more clearly as opposed to when you're in the exhibit hall and it's kind of the bright lights and everything's going on and you're running from place to place. At least here you're sort of centered and you can just sit back and really think about what you're doing. So it's a pretty cool environment. Um, so
That's
let,
that's good.
so let me actually take a look here. So we're going to be having interviews coming up as well, and I'll show people who we're going to be speaking to from the conference today in our live stream. And you can see that what we try to do is actually get the different speakers to come on and talk to us about the talks that they're going to be giving. And I'll also mention to folks that if you miss any of the talks that people are giving, they'll be available on demand as well. So we know with the time zone issues, and Lord do we know it because we're all spread out across the world, the time zone issues have been a big deal. It's afternoon or evening for some folks. For me, it's first thing in the morning. That's why I got my coffee right here. And so if you miss any of these lectures, you can always come back and watch them on demand, which is pretty cool as well. And you can see sort of the lineup of people that we're going to be speaking to. It should be interesting. And one of the ones I just want to highlight here, we're going to be talking to Mike Patella and Dr. Heil. These are the inventors of the HFA, which is
that should be very interesting, actually.
Very cool. It's so rare that you actually get to talk to people who've invented, a device that really changed the world for a lot of people, right? And so we have a really great opportunity to speak with them.
Exactly, and also not only the device itself, but also the algorithms that we use now, like the CETA, and sort of the newer field developments such as the 24C. I think we'll be talking about that as well.
Yep. So that'll be really a lot of fun. And one thing I also want to make people aware of, just because we have a few minutes here before we get started with our first interview, I mentioned that I was in Portland, Oregon. And for those of you who don't maybe know where it is or what's been going on, so I'm in the western half of the United States at this point is on fire, essentially. It's just one gigantic fire. I have a picture here just to sort of show people. So...
Gosh, I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, not the greatest map in the world, but you can sort of see what's going on here. So I'm up here in this corner, and it's been very dry and very windy, and it's sort of they say a 100-year event going on right now where the conditions are just right for fire. And so where I am right now, there's a significant amount of fire going on. If I put up this map, you can sort of see I'm right up here in this green area, and everything in red here is on fire, and people are evacuating. So this is slowly creeping towards me.
I think it's worse on the picture you showed me last night, isn't it?
Yeah. So the fire is slowly, it's slowly creeping. Last night, actually, we kept getting alerts on my phone saying, town 15 miles from here has to evacuate, and so it's getting closer. But it's been a sort of a remarkable few days here. So I'm putting this up there just so people realize if I disappear for some reason during this, that's where I've had to bug out because, and again, I'll put up more pictures to show you. This is right at, a couple blocks from my house. There's been windstorms here, hurricane force winds on top of the dry weather, and that's why the fire is spread. You can see trees down in the middle of the street. If you look at what the city looks like here, that's a midday photo.
Yes, that's the thing. It's midday, isn't it? That's crazy, actually.
Yeah, that's from yesterday, and so it's the whole place literally is on fire. So it's just been a challenging couple days here, and I know for the folks at ZEISS as well, and I know we're going to be speaking to them too. They're also on the West Coast, right? They're in California, not far from where I am, and so they've been dealing with this as well. So I'd be curious to see what's going on in their world.
But I think even if you're quite further away, you can still see the cloud, isn't it? And the air seems to be quite bad for a very large part of the state, isn't it? Yep. About a third of the United States is on fire now, isn't it?
And so the wind is blowing, unfortunately, from east to west, and so all these fires are actually coming over. So even if you're not in a place that's on fire directly, you're getting terrible air quality. So it's been a real challenge here.
Gosh.
So.
Oh gosh. Fingers crossed, Adam. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed that I don't disappear during this show today. I'm actually taking a look here. Our first interview is going to be, I believe, was with Dr. Pazos. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
And I can actually just bring up her slide. So she's actually going to have a talk about restarting her glaucoma practice after COVID-19 in a public university hospital setting. So that should be an interesting talk.
Yes, it's always. I mean, I'm also interested to see how people are restarting now after what's happening, because we have obviously a very significant problem here and everywhere, I guess, with diagnosing and treating a condition that's largely asymptomatic. So if you can't, as we have been having trouble bringing people in, it's very difficult to actually feel that you're doing the right thing, that you feel safe in your practice. So I'm really keen to find out what other people have been doing during this sort of crazy times, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what's actually going on in London? I know for the big cities here in the US, I'm a native New Yorker, and I constantly am in contact with people there. The city areas, the more densely populated areas have kind of sort of depopulated, right? And a lot of practices haven't really rebounded in the urban centers, whereas in suburbia, people are starting to see their practices reopen a bit more. I was talking to a few suburban doctors in suburban New York. They're overwhelmed with patients now, right? Because they had this backlog that they're now starting to take care of. So we're seeing in the United States, at least, this rebound pattern of in the suburbs it's doing well. Center city, not so much, especially because there's no businesses, right? Everyone's working from home. So city centers are a little bit thinner than they used to be.
I mean, here, obviously, the mainstay of care here is the NHS. So you have, so the picture may be similar across the board, because even in more central London, let's say, or sort of bigger cities and towns across England, you have more or less a similar pattern of patients coming in, or but the main concern is that people don't want to come in here. So you have us running at sort of reduced capacity still, and trying to get fewer patients in, if that makes sense. Trying to risk assess and make sure who is in need of treatment, and bring them in quicker, which is always a very difficult thing to do. I fear that with us, the backlog is going to kick in a few months, when people stop being fearful of actually going to the hospital, because now even we calling patients in and they're not coming in. So that is a big problem. And in my hospital, we have about 20,000 appointments for the glaucoma service a year, and I think that now we're less than 50% capacity. So I'm wondering where all these patients are and how, it's quite challenging, I think.
Right. Well, especially with glaucoma, right? Because you have this patient population that you want to closely track. And so how are you dealing with that, right? You have to triage and try to figure out who really does need to be seen versus who you can maybe just put off a little bit longer.
I mean, we have, and in that respect, obviously, doing like virtual clinics or virtual assessments of patients has helped a lot. And in that respect, ZEISS Glaucoma Workplace, which we'll come to later on, has been very helpful, because we get a snapshot of how patients are doing now, but also we can track their history, track their progression. So that's quite important for us.
Right.
We have, and we are also sort of risk assessing every single patient. So we go throughout our cohort of patients, try to identify who's at higher risk, which has been a challenge, really.
Yep. And I put up a picture of Workplace just so everyone can take a look and see. You can sort of see that progression.
Yeah. The right eye is not doing so well, is it?
Nope. And let's see, is Dr. Pazos here yet? Let's see.
I think so.
I think so. And is she muted, or is she? Let's see if Antonio can unmute her. And there we go. Let's see. Can we hear you? Let's see. Dr. Pazos, are you there? Oh, still muted.
Yes, I see she's here.
There we
Hello.
go.
Now?
Hi, hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you very
Great.
loud and clear.
Thank you.
First of all, how are things now? How are you keeping?
Well, in Spain, as you are possibly aware, we're having a second wave right now. So we are seeing that our COVID cases are, little by little going up. It's not as bad as the first one, but we are now in the middle of a second wave, I would say. Yeah.
No, that's true. Would you like actually to, first of all, sort of introduce yourself to everyone who's watching us, and as far as your interest and your specialty background?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is from Barcelona, Spain. Got in Portland, Oregon. Thing here, the training that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So, and then after that, in a big university hospital in Barcelona.
Good. Yes.
My main interest is imaging and telemedicine.
Brilliant. Exactly. So exactly what we need to know more about in this day and age, isn't it? So first of all, coming back now, it's September, obviously. Most people are back at work, I guess, there as well as here. So everybody's back from their holidays, or almost everyone. So what do you feel you need to change in your practice? What sort of adjustments you feel are needed in the sort of current climate?
Yeah, so just like you were mentioning a minute ago, what we are seeing now is that there are a lot of patients that have not been seen.
Exactly.
And as we know, glaucoma is a silent disease, and we wonder where are them and how we can possibly optimize their flow so we can see the biggest amount of patients, but without having them all together in the waiting area, So all this patient flow idea needs to be completely optimized it's a changing thing, just like the pandemic, because this pandemic is a changing thing. It changes every week almost.
That's true.
I would like to find a way to reduce that amount of patients that I see, but at the same time seeing as much as I can.
Yeah, that's very true. So what kind of method, what kind of telemedicine sort of are you actually using, and what you think would be successful in the future for sort of everyday glaucoma practice?
So I will cover that in my presentation with more detail, but in general terms, what we do is we first do a risk assessment of our patients, and we try to have a systematic to see the ones that we think they need to be seen. Definitely not to miss those ones who are in risk of blindness. And at the same time, we are also having a semi-virtual clinic, let's say. So we tend to do the most we can at home, which is not 100% in glaucoma yet, because some testings are still needed and IUP is not completely done at home, all these kind of fields and all. But we are trying to do some part of it, at least in a semi-virtual way. And that's helping us.
That's
I'll
brilliant.
show you later.
Good. So you're actually testing. That's great to see. You're actually having some tests people take at home.
Well, we do as much as we can, and that's something we would like to go further, because still we cannot do everything at home. So what we do is we make them come in a different setting, which is led by our optometrists and not by us.
Yes.
And then we read all that. And as you said, Glaucoma Workplace helps us so much in integrating all the information. And later on, we call them. In the future, we would like to include some things that patients can self-monitor at home, but we don't do that yet.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
We cannot.
We have been doing here, I guess most hospitals in London have been doing the same thing as far as risk assessing their patients. And then when we found the cohort that needs more care, we're bringing these patients in, have their diagnostic test, virtually review them, and then bring obviously the high risk patients in. Do you feel, on the other hand, there is like any new technologies, any new methods that you would that you want to sort of implement that you think should be that are available now or will be available in the near future?
So I really would like to try to give some patients, not possibly all of them, but those who we think they are able to give them like a self IOP monitoring system, like the eye care, something like this, and see how reliable that is for us, because then we will have something more that we definitely don't need to do every time. But we need to really make sure that those measurements are reliable and how well they correlate with our measures at the clinic. But definitely I would like to give that a try and explore it more.
And there are also, I understand, also nowadays ways of doing visual fields at home, isn't it, with a computer screen?
Yeah, even with an iPad. Even with an iPad, you can do that, apparently.
I know. The things, how do you correlate the problem is how do you correlate the at-home results with your clinical results, or would you just think you can use that as a screening method, sort of bringing the high-risk patients in and then run your own diagnostics?
Exactly. It brings a whole discussion because all these, big multi-centric studies that we know and we base our decisions on are basically produced with an office measurements, office
Yeah.
IUP, current standard, imaging and functional test techniques. And it's, definitely it's not the same thing. So we need to know how to do that, how to exactly correlate one thing with the other. But I think COVID has bring us a great opportunity to
That's true, yes. There's
change
always a
things.
silver lining, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there are some things that we would never have dared to do, and now we need to do. So we are doing things that we thought
yes.
we won't do, I think.
I think we also find, which is walking on thin ice, really, but we find that sometimes many of the consultations we take, or many of our sort of the intervals that we're seeing patients may not be appropriate, that we're sort of over monitoring patients sometimes. So we do find that, but the problem is also how would you sort of find the difficult cases or the high risk patients among everybody else, isn't it? Among everybody else who is very low risk, because to be honest, most patients in our clinics, if you take all of our patients across every clinic, they're not very high risk. The higher risk patients are few, but the problem is what happens if you miss them. That's the thing.
Yeah. I think risk assessment and stratification is crucial. But all these decisions that we make based on risk are actually done using measurements that we do at the clinic. So that's why it's very hard to do all virtual in glaucoma.
Yeah. Do you find that actually bringing patients in, running diagnostic tests, and then sort of bring the high-risk patients in afterwards helps? Sort of bringing them in, having them streamlined in, and then walking out without seeing a doctor?
And definitely and again, I will cover this in my presentation, but patients needed a mindset to that. But right now, we are doing very well. That we say, next time, if they understand and if they know their glaucoma consultant with them, that's the difference for them. And in terms of patient flow, it helps because we use a different, let's say, a different itinerary, for the patients. Mm-hmm. So that makes everything a little bit more controlled. And actually, our high-risk patients' flow, it's optimized. So we have more time for those patients that are harder.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And for everyone who's watching the presentation, your presentation would be at 5:30 Central European Time. For me, 4:30 here. And obviously, you'll be talking extensively about things that you think should change in the practice, what you're doing now, as far as monitoring higher risk patients and all that, which I think is very useful, and that's what people are looking at. We're looking at examples of best practice now, seeing what everybody else is doing to try to find what the best way forward is. Because currently, I think everybody's trying different things, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm going to present is our approach to it and how is it working for us with numbers of what we've been doing so far. So, and it's something we want to share with everyone. But of course, it's just our way, and we are all all ready to have ideas and other suggestions. And I think this meeting is going to be very nice because we will all together share all this experience that it's been very difficult for all of us.
Brilliant. Yes, excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm looking forward to your presentation in about, I guess, half an hour. Yes?
Yeah, great. See you later.
Brilliant. So, Adam?
Yep.
Are we... I don't see you, Adam. Yeah, there you are. Are we...
There I am.
So brilliant. So Dr. Paz's presentation is in about half an hour, as you mentioned.
Yep.
For everyone who wants to follow that stream and watch it and understand, there's also going to be questions that can be raised by people who are watching us.
Yep, that's true. And so, this is an interactive session. That's why we bring people in here live. So it should be a really interesting, thing. Go in and ask questions, right? That's what we're here for. I know some people like to watch on demand, but it's great when people come in and kind of mix it up. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. So people can actually log in and raise questions for most presentations, I understand.
Yep, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yes. Now we have 5 minutes before we have our next guest coming on. But before we do that, let me just show everyone. I want to give everyone a little insight into what's going on here. One thing that ZEISS has been doing, if you take nothing else away from today and the live stream, Med Support Now is the page on their website, which is sort of their one-stop shop for all the different resources that they have as you're trying to sort of get back to your new normal, as they call it. They give you resources on how to clean equipment, breath shields as well, and drapes for your instruments, best practices on social distancing. They give you all kinds of advice. They actually show you how to hook up things like your ZEISS, so you can use it to sort of distance yourself from your patients. They show you the cables that you need, sort of, and the step-by-step how to actually get it working yourself instead of waiting for a technician. You can buy the cables, off of Amazon or whatever, and actually hook it up yourself so you don't have to wait. So they have all this advice and education as well in this one portal. So definitely check it out, Med Support Now. If you forget the URL, just go into Google and type ZEISS Med Support Now and it'll come up for you. So it's a really great resource. So definitely something people should check out. And I don't even know in your own clinic, what's going on with your equipment? Have you been able to install things like breath shields and drapes and stuff to try to make a little bit of distance from your patients?
Yes, exactly. So we have been, at first, obviously everyone was taken aback, but then quite quickly we had, and obviously ZEISS has been brilliant in this, that breath shields were provided. We try to do our best actually, and the practice now, at least in England, is that you get obviously doctors and patients wearing masks coming in the hospital, so you can't be walking around the hospital without wearing a mask. And we're also using breath shields at the same time, sort of bigger extended breath shields. But I think the main, the game changer for good and for bad actually is that we can't bring all the patients in now. So the problem is that we have all these patients so with sort of social distancing guidelines now, much fewer patients coming in. So we can't have the waiting room in the traditional sense. So we try to streamline our appointments and make it like an in and out sort of process, which is very challenging, I think.
Right. And so let me pull up now. I think I think our next guest is here. And let me flip it on over. And Angelo, are you here?
Yes, Adam, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi,
no worries. Hi, Chris, how are you?
So Angelo, I just wanted to say thank you again for throwing all of this together, because I know this was a really heavy lift to put this entire program together. It's sort of amazing the stuff that you've done over the past several months, I guess even since February or March, since the pandemic started. And I guess we have a double whammy going on here today as well. I'm sure you're getting some smoke where you are too.
Yeah.
So this has been a little bit challenging.
Well, I'm lucky. I'm actually on vacation at Lake Tahoe, and we actually had clear blue skies yesterday, probably due to the altitude.
Right.
So from that perspective, it wasn't so bad.
Excellent. Well, here today, coming from vacation, so thank you for again coming on.
No worries.
I want to just talk a little bit about Fast Start. You just heard the interview that we just did, and practices really are trying to get back to normal as best they can, and they're all restarting again. You have this Fast Start program. Do you want to speak to us a little bit about what that is?
Well, I think what you just showed on the Med Support Now is kind of the antithesis of what we've done. And you and I have talked about this over the COVID time. ZEISS went into support mode within hours of the lockdowns happening across the world with respect to COVID. And so, we did the breast sheath program, which continues, but we also, as you mentioned, have the protection devices and coverings for the devices. and the social distancing aspects with respect to ZEISS and HFA, which are typically the devices that have the heaviest load in a practice. The fundus camera, of course, the Claris will as well, and we've done things there, but we also have some distancing built into that design to some extent compared to other wide field devices. So we're continuing to look at those things. We haven't stopped. Our real focus right now is understanding how to open practices. And it was interesting to hear the European perspective. I've been getting feedback from the team. In the US, the jump onto a virtual event with a patient happened very quickly. And I mean, CMS enabled that because of the payment change. Whereas I sense that Europe is not going at the same pace. They're still wanting to see patients as much as possible in the office. And as was just mentioned, the challenge you have is then how do you get them into the office? How do you social distance? How do you say, protect your staff and protect the patient? And these are the challenges. And when you talk about glaucoma, which is a complex disease in the sense of, when you have an AMD patient, you put them on, you understand their disease, you do the workup, you understand who they are, you put them on a regimen and they're there, right? Which of course is under challenge with COVID. With glaucoma, to some extent, every patient's response, their compliance to their drops, how they're progressing, all that creates greater complexity, I think, than you have, for instance, in a wet AMD situation.
Absolutely. Yep. And so you mentioned here in the US, we have been sort of migrating to these more digital solutions and doing all sorts of remote management. So what is it that you think going forward? And again, we're sort of still in that crisis period, right? Things aren't normal, even though they're trying to revert to normal as best we can. What do you think going forward? What's it going to look like, here in the US and everywhere else?
Well, this is the challenge, I think, if I think about the difference between the US and Europe. I think no matter what, whether you're 30% virtual or you're 10% virtual, if I think about the European model. And again, I'm estimating, I don't have any real numbers to support this, but I'm just saying there's a significant difference between the two, at least based on the feedback that I've been given. The most important thing to look at is ensuring that this practice workflow can be really optimized, if you can call it that, with the current situation. And that includes practices moving where their equipment is, some of it in the hallways or what used to be the waiting room, because the waiting room isn't used the way it was before. And so just to be able to ensure that flow works, and of course with all the protection that we've tried to enhance on our products, and that is going to bring you to a certain limit. The other challenge, of course, is the doctor's time, because you have the diagnostic element and then you have the doctor's time. And there is where I think you run into a challenge as far as how much data you need to look at, right? Structure, function, GPA, all these functions that have become very commonplace. You have the challenge of creating that data, and then you have the challenge of having that conversation with the patient in the most efficient way as possible so you can see the next patient. And, if you look at like Glaucoma Workplace, you see where we're bringing together things like structure and function into one view. You can see IOP and all the other elements that you need in a practice to really work that efficiently. Now, if I parallel that to the United States or anywhere that wants to use virtual, you can use this. As a matter of fact, you just have the dashboard up. You can have a conversation with a patient on a Zoom call and have everything integrated into one view. You don't have to flip from device to device or report to report or the EMR and then flip back. So if you're talking about a patient who you're concerned about their compliance, you can, speak to that top left chart and say, I'm really concerned about your progression. I'm really concerned. Are you sure you're taking those drops? Can you get help putting those drops in? Can you set a timer on your phone, whatever it might be, to try to help that patient? Because in essence, your distance management, right? And the previous speakers were talking about, are there things that can be done at home to watch that progression? And of course, if a patient's progressing quickly, of course, those devices at home might be able to catch something. but that isn't where all of our data sits or where our clinical practices sit. So the balance between, utilizing these years and years of experience and knowledge, and of course, bring that together with what's happening at home. And these are the things that, our physician partners are challenged with every single day. And, our focus is trying to find solutions as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned, and I think the speakers have been mentioning too, this idea of doing things at home. And I'm not sure how well this is going to work. I mean, obviously, like things like your watch can you can do a little EKG now, right? Obviously, not a replacement for a proper cardiology exam, but could possibly pick up problems. And I wonder if that's going to sort of be the trend going forward as well, with patients just trying to self-monitor as best they can, just to sort of act as a filter to then get them into the office.
Yeah. Well, the best remedy is compliance, right? And you also have a range of patients, for instance, in glaucoma, right? If you have an older patient, it may be that they try, if I think back, my father's gone, but, I remember, when he was trying to take his own meds, having the skill to hit your eye with the drop was challenging for him. And my mom was at home and she was older. So they struggled at home, and it wasn't they weren't trying to be compliant. They thought they were, but they were missing, right? The eye, for instance. And these are the kinds of things that we need to look at also. I think we have to rethink, and there was work being done, still being done, in thinking about long-acting treatments for glaucoma before you go to a surgical event. And I think these are the types of things we're going to see. And I think that is what's going to trigger the need for monitoring outside of the office, is when you have now changed the treatment model in such a way that the patient doesn't come back because you expect to extend treatment for a certain period of time. As you're seeing in wet AMD, I think those things will come into glaucoma and other diseases as well.
Yep.
Yeah. If I can sort of interject here. So exactly, this is what we're doing as well. So we are now part of a trial that actually deals with sort of these long-acting medications in my hospital. But like you said, my main concern in as far as monitoring at home or monitoring out of the office is your consistency of data and your reliability. And you get all those years of data available now on ZEISS Workplace, your visual fields, your OCTs, macular scans integrated, your structure function, your GPA analysis. And then the concern is, this is invaluable. It's invaluable as far as judging which patient will progress, but also which patient is at risk now. But the thing is, if the more people are away from the office or away from having any sort of diagnostics, the more you lose them, the more a black hole is created. And that puts patients at risk.
Yeah, and I think I could share with you guys, Adam. A few years ago, we made an investment in a company that had a technology on an iPhone or an iPad. It wasn't for glaucoma, but for AMD, and we started socializing this concept with doctors, with retina specialists, and because it's not OCT, the challenge we had was, okay, tell me how this function on this iPad correlates to my OCT in the office.
Right.
And now you have to think about the clinical study and the amount of years it would take to collect the data to accurately correlate those two. It becomes a significant challenge. And this is, and I'm not saying it can't be done, but now as a company, there's so many different technologies. You can't have 10 shots on goal. The cost of that is very high. So then you've got to figure out, how do you determine the best shot on goal before you make a significant investment in a clinical study to understand that correlation. And big companies wrestle with that. I'm not sure how little companies will do it, but we need to make those calls, because of course there's so many things that the industry needs, and we need to be selective in what we bring to the market. So these are the challenges that we face. We understand the need. I was at a conference earlier before everything got shut down this year, and it was on glaucoma, and it was related to IOP monitoring at home. And it was like one of these startups things where the startups present their ideas, and then there's a panel of experts, and I won't speak to who the panels are or who the companies are, but the panel of experts started saying, well, how are you sure that we need to have IOP monitoring every day at home? Why do you believe that's true? What do you know what I mean? So on one hand, we have a technology, but those who manage that disease are not completely convinced that having this data that, of course, if you start talking about multiple IOP measurements per day or per hour, that's a massive amount of data. Who's responsible for all of that data, and then what it may or may not say? So the complexity of this is beyond what we typically think of. And I think the opportunity, though, as was mentioned earlier, COVID started this discussion. Now we've got to really bring it to a point where there's deliverables and the regulatory organizations are willing to accept some of these new technologies and new applications.
Right. And let's speak to that for a second, right? Because this is a global audience that we're speaking with right now.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that? Who's going to make these first moves? Is it going to happen in Europe first or the US, or do you have any sense?
So we always, and you could see this for years now, you always saw devices like the glaucoma devices, surgical devices, were launched in Europe first and then came to the US. With the changes in the regulatory landscape with MDR coming into place in Europe over the next 12 months, it's been delayed because of COVID, but it's in the process of being done. You basically raise Europe to the same bar that you have with the US, maybe even, some might say, even a little higher. China has been raising their bar for years now. So the reality of it is that there is going to be a limited places where you can basically bring something in and jumpstart it. You're going to have to go through the heavy lifting of the clinical work. And what that means is that a delay of bringing technology to market on one hand. On the other hand, what the regulators might say is, well, then we're sure when that technology comes, it's stable and safe. So these are the kinds of things that always, we're challenged with. The reality of it is the mission should be about improving the care to patients, not generating revenue. Because if companies get caught up in trying to generate revenue before they help patients. So the reality of it is the regulators are just trying to bring that into a point where we have things focused on the right thing. And I truly believe in my heart, and that's why I've been in medtech for over 30 years now, is if we do the right thing for the patient, all the rest will come. All the rest will come. And that has to be the focus. And I think it's done well. If you look at how successful ZEISS has been, I think it's been about that. It's about technologies that really help patients, and then the rest comes. And we'll continue to do that as our focus and our DNA is really in innovation.
Okay, well, Angelo, thank you for this again, for setting all of this up. And you've created an incredible educational resource, and I hope people take advantage of it, not just with today's lecture, but also the huge library that you guys have built up over the past several months.
Thank you, Adam. I think before I go, I want to give a shout out to the team because, I might pay the bills, but they actually do the work. And they've done an incredible job. And we've gone virtual almost immediately with COVID. And again, focused on support and education. And we're really excited about where things are going, and we'll continue to support in any way we can.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
Take care.
All righty. So let me just pull this up here so everyone can see it again. And just to underscore what Angelo was saying, and you can take a look at the Med Support Now page. Again, if you remember nothing else from today, remember that page because this will be your portal to all the resources that we were just speaking about. So again, thank you, Angelo, for coming today. That was pretty cool.
I mean, these sort of technologies make things much easier for us and actually feel much safer. I mean, in my hospital where we have for years been doing virtual clinics, more than 10 years now. And now about 35% of our practice is actually in virtual clinics, virtual in as far as getting patients in, having their diagnostics and then reviewed by the consultant later on. So these sort of technologies are very useful because it makes you gives you a level of confidence when you are giving sort of advice before, without seeing the patient really.
Right.
It's very useful.
Yep. And it looks like, I think our next interviewees are here. Let me take a look here. I think it was Dr. Ahmed, I think is here. Did he finally make it? Let's see. And yeah, it looks like he's here. Connecting to audio. Hang on for 1 second. This is a Zoom thing. And as soon as he gets his audio connected, maybe we can start the next set of interviews here. So let's see. So everybody's still muted. Oh, there he is. Okay, there we go. So here, let me put him on up. And
Hey guys, how's it going?
hey, good. How's it going with you?
Good, good. Just in the OR.
Hi, Ike. Always on the go.
Great. How's life, man?
Good, surviving. That's the thing, isn't it?
Great. So how's this going to work out again? Remind me.
So we're going to be asking very difficult questions,
Okay, good.
and then you'll be giving us very brilliant answers.
Okay, good. Is Matt Schlenker joining? I don't remember.
Yeah,
Oh, Matt is here. Perfect.
Matt should be here as well. Yeah.
I see him. Okay, well he'll get all the hard questions. I'll just be here to just point.
Well, I mean, brilliant for everyone. I mean, everyone knows Ike and Matt. Obviously, with Ike, we have many common interests in obviously glaucoma, and I think our main difference may be hairstyles, which you can't which you can't really see now. But yes,
There you go.
I mean, there's a bit of a difference there, I think. I've been told yesterday when we're doing the dry run that there may be some glare coming off the top of my head, and we'll try to find ways of sorting that out. Anyway, so it's a great pleasure, obviously, to have you both here. And there are a few questions, obviously, that we need to ask in trying to bridge our, what happens in America and what happens here in Europe. So obviously there are many similarities between in general what happens in the Canadian healthcare system and what happens in Europe. And obviously we're facing the same challenges nowadays. So the first question I want to ask is, what do you feel are the main challenges, and how do you have to, or have you had to adapt or change your workflow due to COVID-19?
I'm happy to take a stab at this first, and I'm sure Matt will have some comments. I think that, during the height of the pandemic, of course, we were super worried about patient exposure and staff exposure. And so taking all the precautions in terms of cleaning and PPE was important. A lot of concern about visual field testing and the bowl and the cleaning and how do we properly, space patients around. I think that's eased a little bit here in Canada, but it still remains a concern. I think the reliance on OCT has always been, I think, increasing interest, but I think particularly lately now, I think it's become paramount where we can get people in and out with OCT quickly and not necessarily prolonged testing with good reliability. So I think that's one thing I think that I would say. And I think we're still searching for the best way to kind of, how do we measure pressure properly, right? That involves a visit, and, using home tonometry, using other methods, I think is perhaps what we want to look at in the future. So, those are some of the early things that we've done. I mean, we certainly triage patients appropriately in terms of, based on IOP more than anything else. We were not so worried about slow progression. We were worried about IOP, and our treatments were based on how high is the IOP. Now that we have some time to follow people, we're now acting on, diagnostics more so. But I would say that's kind of what we did initially, super cautious, and made sure that we were, cognizant of the concerns. I don't know, Matt, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think, we're in a little bit of a different phase now here in Canada, but we are seeing some, what I call COVID casualties. And these are eyes that have not done well during COVID through some combination of patients not wanting to come in and possibly some false reassurance from clinicians and through virtual care. Whereas Ike said, if the eye pressure is not measured, regardless of the disease status or the progression in the past, we may or may not know what's happening at the present time. And I've seen a number of patients, unfortunately, who had asymptomatic, extremely elevated eye pressures who were sitting at home for whatever reason. And these are some of the indirect costs we're seeing. Now, as we start back, I'd echo what Ike said. OCTs have always been reasonably fast, thankfully, and with some extra precautions, including masks and better sterilization techniques. I think we're doing quite well. I think the CETA faster algorithm has been a kind of a win-win in this situation as well, to speed up our visual field testing. I think from a surgical standpoint, we were erring on the side of definitive treatments in kind of the main phase of COVID, though I still have a little bit of that bias where I had that discussion with the patient, and in the context of follow-up, it's not really the surgery I'm worried about. It's the number of follow-ups and the potential for complications begetting more follow-ups.
Exactly. I mean, also from my respect, what I'm seeing is exactly what you mentioned, many COVID casualties. So you see patients that didn't come in, or exactly that false sense of security that you may be getting sometimes when you're doing a virtual assessment. And just to reiterate that point, we were doing initially some telephone consultations with patients, which is very weird in glaucoma. And when I was asked by my hospital if I'm happy with it, I was told that, are the patients happy? I said yes. Are you happy calling patients? Yes. Then they told me, why do you seem so unhappy? And I'm like, because I'm not seeing patients going blind. And usually I see about 7 or 10 patients every week that are going blind, and I stopped seeing them. And I knew they're out there. They haven't been magically cured. So maybe I even spoke to them on the phone and gave them the all clear. So if you don't have the diagnostics, probably you're somehow entering a black hole. You don't exactly know what you're doing. And this has been a challenge here as well with us. The other thing I want to touch upon is, would you give us a sort of a quick brief about your presentation? What will you be talking about in your presentation later today?
Yeah, well, so yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a pleasure to present with Matt. We've been using OCT technology for many years, and so we've seen the generations come forward. We're very excited, for example, with OCT angio and what this could mean, for the future of assessment, functional assessment as well. And I think that'll be interesting. We're going to speak basically about just the process in terms of reviewing and understanding OCT. There's some nuances that are important. I still find, and I'm sure Matt will agree, that there's a lot of effort to get him, to understand the printout and know the artifacts and know what can be the false negatives and the false positives, the so-called red disease and the green disease. And having a more, qualitative assessment of the OCT printout is important. So we're going to review that. We'll talk about understanding progression analysis and the latest in this. I think it's really, we've come a long way now with the statistical packages we get with OCT. I feel incredibly confident when I have that printout and the dynamic way to look at it. Matt's going to talk about also with Forum the ability to, again, dynamically assess certain areas, with the workstation as well, and be able to refine looking at progression more specifically, because of course in glaucoma, progression isn't necessarily generalized. It's typically very focal, and the ability to hone in on that, looking at hemisections and hemiquadrants is of value. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. Hopefully be very practical, useful. And more than ever, I think during this COVID era, we all need to be very on top of our game with how do we use OCT technology, both with this screening as well as looking for progression.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to make very good use of our resources. You're absolutely right. Matt, a question to you. How do you feel the use of the OCTA in glaucoma management is coming along?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I first would just echo, what Ike said about, and you as well, Chris, about the need to be really sharp with our imaging. OCT and hopefully OCTA eventually as well are really been a revolution in our ability to diagnose and watch for progression, but it's also causes a lot of false positives, which can lead to uncertainty and can lead to extra visits for the patient. So we need to be careful to make sure that we're using this resource in a way that's not begetting. That can also be, it can cause false alarms, but it also cause reassurance. And that does speak to our skill in looking at these as well. I do see promise in OCTA. I don't know if I'm there yet where I would say it's part of my standard workup. I think we have a lot more to learn, and that's where I think it is challenging, where we don't necessarily, we're not necessarily at the point yet, at least in my practice, where I can say it's a mainstay. Though the possibility to really hone in on the structure-function relationship and being sensitive in detecting both from a diagnosis and a progression, I think is really there for OCTA.
Yeah.
I would just add that with OCT, I mean, and imaging of the nerve, we've come a long way. Remember the old days of simply just looking at the rim and the cup? We then evolved into the RNFL. We now look at ganglion cell analysis with RNFL and optic nerve OCT analysis. So, I mean, it's incredibly advanced now how we can basically get a glove, literally, of the entire anatomy of the back of the eye to look for glaucoma. I think OCT angio certainly is very exciting.
One previous system we were using to the ZEISS glaucoma workplace, at first I was very, very apprehensive and sort of concerned about how smooth that would be. But it has proven that we were able to move, first of all our visual fields, even from older machines, from very old machines actually, to the glaucoma workplace, and the same with the OCT scans. So that has been very useful, because I was concerned that we would be losing data, but actually we haven't been doing that. So we have been quite safe, and that has been very useful.
Yeah, having everything in one place, and you mentioned, of course, the glaucoma workplace and forum, all of that data in one single location, again, increases that efficiency. So, one may have had to go to the different devices, and, each device has its special, manipulation, if you like, of that data and software. But if you can make that, if you like, streamline and pull everything together in one location where you can see, as we've seen, and you can see on the screen, we pull up, for example, our forum values, etc. All of that comes together in a very, very instantly recognizable. And, most important thing, I think, is going back maybe to Ike's comment earlier, which was a confidence. His comment was that he's confident now in looking at that data. And as you said, you had a nervousness, but all of a sudden now, as you see it and it comes together, you realize, no, it's all there. It's everything I need. And what you're doing is you're taking advantage of, let's face it, some very, very high-end equipment, whether it's the ZEISS family of OCTs, whether it's our Claris wide field fundus imaging device. All of those images, even back to, let's face it, our completely necessary HFA3, all of those results are all available and are interchangeable. One can overlay, we can drop our OCT scan, may even be an OCTA, onto our wide field fundus view and compare that structurally and all, against every other element that's within our forum package.
Yep. I had one question for you, Ben. Do people in general, or have they, when they're upgrading from one unit to the next, do they sometimes go slowly and do just a few of their units first? Because you can mix and match, right? You don't have to just take the plunge and replace everything at once, right?
Adam, that's a really good question, but from experience, it's amazing how fast that transfer changes. Maybe a little bit like changing your vehicle. Mm-hmm. Change your vehicle, you get a new vehicle, there's some new buttons on the dashboard, you're not quite sure what they are, but as soon as you've pressed it, whoa, I didn't know I had that. That's great. And before you know it, boom, you're well away. And that's what happens migrating to new devices. All of a sudden, we had a fantastic paper come out of Cleveland Clinic recently where they talked about, and I mentioned it earlier, maybe the Cedar Faster comparison of moving into a COVID unfortunate environment. One would not necessarily previously have adapted a different or new technology because one was busy. All of a sudden, we need to change that efficiency. We introduce something and bang, it suddenly proves that we can massively improve our efficiencies. And as much as the pandemic is in no means a good thing, it has helped some of our customers to improve their efficiencies that they may never have considered doing previously. So going back to your question, if you, for example, introduce a ZEISS 6000 to your workflow and compare that to let's say a 4000, we can be 270 times faster, or 270% faster than our original device. We could be 50% faster in our OCTA acquisition and capture data cubes. And remember, those dense data cubes are what we use today in our AI technologies, across the globe. And if we're looking at OCT data in an AI format, it's a dense data cube, not just a single scan, but a dense data cube. And we capture those in less than 0.4 of a second. So you can see how all of this talks about that efficiency. And again, going back to your question, Adam, the introduction of a new device is embraced very quickly by a practice or a hospital environment, simply because it's such a difference in the workflow that sometimes those older machines, they kind of get parked and they're there if they're needed, but the new device is so much more efficient that things just move on naturally.
Right. It's kind of like when you get a new cell phone, right? The idea of going back to your old one is totally unthinkable. That's why you pawn it off to your kids or whatever, right?
Yeah. And talking about a cell phone, how many of us have read, the instruction manual? You lose man points if you read an instruction manual. I jest, but the point is, from using an actual mobile phone, you get a new one, you kind of press the buttons, you feel your way around. And the same with our ZEISS devices. The GUI, the GUI as we call it, the interface, the user interface is exactly the same. It's not any different. So all your that learning curve, yeah, it can be steep when you've got some new scan protocols, but it's pretty instantaneous, just like your example of picking up a new phone.
Right. All right, Ben. Well, thank you for doing this again. This has been fun. I don't know how many times we've done this now. This is maybe the third, fourth, something like that. It's always fun to talk, though. We always learn something new. So thanks for coming out here again.
Well, I said I'm starting to dress like you, my friend. Really, I didn't realize until we came online there, but hey, not a problem. Please, everybody enjoy the virtual event. The booth is fully manned with all of our colleagues from the different nationalities who can speak directly to you with local programs. Making that transition to the current 6000 is definitely the way forward from glaucoma management point of view.
Great. All right, Ben. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Cheers, Chris.
All right.
So thanks, Ben. I'm also expecting the 6000 in my practice as soon as possible. You just made a promise right there, didn't you?
Of course.
We'll see about that. I think we have Javier Ortiz waiting. Is that correct, Adam?
Yes.
Yep. Looks like it.
Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, I can hear you very well. How are you?
Okay.
How are you keeping?
Fine, thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Harit Urcola. I'm coming from Spain, and it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this global meeting. Thank you, Chris and Adam, for inviting me.
Brilliant. So first of all, I would like to ask you, for people that don't know, obviously Javier has been has published a lot about viscocanaloplasty, and this is one of your favorite procedures.
There's no favorite procedure. It's a procedure where I feel really comfortable, and I feel confident about what the procedure offers to each patient. But I shift from one procedure to other depending on what do I want to achieve in each patient. So I move from deep sclerectomy to mixed surgery to canaloplasty and to tubes, depending on each patient and glaucoma status.
What would you say? I mean, if I want to take you up on it, what would you say are not the advantages, but actually the disadvantages of viscocanaloplasty when you compare that to sort of filtering procedures?
Okay, let's talk first about advantages. There are not big statistical differences in terms of intraocular pressure decrease and number of medications when we compare filtering surgeries to canaloplasty. So mainly it's the same, but obviously the cost of a microcatheter is something that we have to take into account or take into a consideration, because it's an expensive surgery. And secondly, related to the same thing, that the main disadvantage could be how could we tackle, or how could we face or manage a steep learning curve in canaloplasty, because it's really steep. First, you have to do a perfect deep sclerectomy, and then you have to viscodilate 360 degrees of the Sims canal. So it's an expensive procedure, and something that when you want to introduce to this technique, this is something you have to take into account. There are other minor disadvantages that I haven't mentioned during my presentation. For example, we can induce astigmatism in this procedure, but nowadays the way we perform or we do the stitches, we can, or we're comfortable, we can avoid this astigmatism. These are the main disadvantages that I have to talk about.
Yeah, brilliant. I know that, first of all, another question, because I know you just had your presentation. I kind of missed it because I was obviously on the live stream with Adam, who has been sort of keeping me here and preventing me from seeing some of the presentation. So why did you have John Wayne on there and Clint Eastwood on one of the slides?
Sorry, could you repeat?
On one of the presentation, or on one of the slides that I've seen
John Wayne. Okay. Yes, because Clint Eastwood and John Wayne, I like these two actors, but they are really big actors and they tackle difficult questions or difficult issues. And glaucoma and high myopia is really difficult for us. So I was thinking which kind of actors to introduce, or to make a comparison in this issue, and I thought about these two actors. Next presentation, I'm going to find for other actresses, and we could talk about this.
Brilliant. So, in as far as, I mean, you mentioned myopic eyes, which you feel it's a good procedure. What other indications would you find in your everyday practice for a viscocanaloplasty?
Okay, I've been performing canaloplasties since 2012. I visited in 2013 or 12, the same year, Norbert Korber, who is a big surgeon in Cologne, in Germany. And he gave me some tips, which are, or currently are, really easy for me to introduce. And so when you are introducing in a learning curve or a new procedure, you are always learning, and I've been learning on the fly. So first I started with those surgeries which had previous failed surgery, are the most difficult cases, because as ICAMED has shown us in many presentations, those had scarring conjunctival tissue, and it's not easy to create a flap or a subconjunctival space in there. So mainly my three indications for canaloplasty nowadays currently are previously failed filtering surgeries, as I presented, in highly myopic eyes, because they have really thin sclera, and hypotony is a complication that could be avoided with this abexternal canaloplasty. And also for these young patients or Afro-Caribbean patients that have poor prognosis, or at least a poorer prognosis than other patients. These are the main three indications in my hands nowadays with canaloplasty.
That's brilliant. And what would you say to surgeons that are trying to sort of thinking of introducing the procedure in their practice? What do you feel is would be the, apart from, you mentioned the cost, what would you feel is that would be the main obstacle in someone trying to get trained or introduce viscocanaloplasty?
To manage astigmatism, and also a very mean or very low free in terms of frequency, very low patients have, but something that you have to tackle, which is a destament viscohemorrhagic detachment. This is something that could occur with ab externo canaloplasty and also with ABIC, with ab interno. So this is something that you have to take into account that can occur, and how to manage with the testament membrane detachment. But how to jump or get with this steep learning curve is, first you have to feel really comfortable with a deep sclerectomy, and then once you have done hundreds of deep sclerectomies and you feel comfortable, you can get into this ab externo canaloplasty.
Okay, brilliant. Obviously, you have been, as in the UK, you have in Spain been suffering. We're in the same boat in as far as COVID, aren't we? So, what do you feel are the main difficulties in as far as finding patients now in this sort of COVID pandemic? Has it been difficult for you to get patients in?
Yes, Matteo, Saki, and Matt also, and Ike has mentioned some of the difficulties and how have been we moving during these months. Something that we had previously done on March, April was really interesting, that we were able to supply double medication for those patients during the lockdown. And as we also, it was mentioned that doing phone calls that we did the first month during March and first weeks of April, this is not real telemedicine, doing phone calls. It was necessary for patients because they feel really calm. But when we look at this problem with retrospectively, we know that this is a black hole. So patients were feeling calm, but nowadays we are, as you mentioned also previously, we are watching some patients which are really uncontrolled. For example, with neovascular glaucoma, and something that I'm really aware of is how we are going to find patients which still on September nowadays are self-confident or confined. Patients which are self-confined, how they are going to arrive to our consultancy in next weeks or months. This is something that I'm really aware.
Yeah, and obviously our target group, unless you're doing pediatric glaucoma, are not very young patients. You know, all the patients that are coming in to see us are usually, I mean, most of them are usually older, isn't it? And that puts them more at risk. And you have to justify bringing patients in, and who do you bring in, who do you don't bring in. And my concern is that there's going to be holes in this, and some patients may sort of slip through the cracks, and you may be missing them. I mean, obviously we mentioned that a proper telephone call is not, I mean, it may be good for an orthopedic surgeon, possibly, but something for us may not be very suitable. So what kind of sort of telemedicine do you think we should be using, and where do you think this may be heading in the future?
Yes, something that we are learning with COVID is that we have to prioritize everything. So we have to put different colors for different patients: green colors, yellow colors, and red colors. So in terms of these red color patients will be the most advanced glaucoma patients. Most of these patients have been already checked or have done the follow-up. So and surgery has been performed during these months. And now I think that we have to focus in these orange or yellow patients, which are those early moderate glaucoma patients that probably hasn't been checked for 6 months. So we are going to start now in 1st October a real telemedicine where we combine the virtual consultancy with physical consultancy. There's a really good publication of 3-4 years ago in the Finnish group. They were combining this virtual clinic with the present clinic, and every 18 months, I think it was something like that, they had a physical consultancy, but each 6 months they have a virtual consultancy. So this is something we are going to introduce now. And as you also mentioned, we are trying to do with all-in-one clinics. So I mean, fast diagnostic tools, as for example, Sita Faster, and also doing all diagnostic machines in the same consultancy, OCTs, visual fields, and obviously tonometer in the same consultancy.
Yes, brilliant. I mean, obviously, this has been very hard, really, for everyone. Do you feel that surgically this will change the kind of procedures that you will be performing in the future, or do you think that we're going to go back to business as usual, or is there going to be a shift in what surgery will be offering?
I think that Ike has been pushing us to shift into mixed surgery the last 5 years. So this is a wave that we cannot stop. We are surfing in this wave. So mixed surgery is going to be with us for the next years or decades. And trabeculectomy, you were previously talking about trap. I think that we have trying to avoid traps during COVID era, but I think that is a technique that still is the main stone in our surgery. So it's going to continue. And also, as I defended, there are going to be other techniques as canaloplasty or other mixed plus surgeries. So you were talking previously about cars and phones. So glaucoma is becoming more difficult because we have more diagnostic tools and more therapeutical procedures, but we are personalizing glaucoma for each patient. So I think it's more difficult, but it's better for patients.
Yeah, I also think we're being sort of spoiled for choice now. So many things that we can do that sometimes it's becoming a bit difficult to actually find what we do for each patient. Thank you very much, Javier, for your time and your input. So I wish you all the best in sort of finding and treating these patients, which has been a challenge to every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome. Adam, you're still there?
I am still here.
Not on fire. Well done. Do you have an update on that map?
Yeah, you know what? Unfortunately, they haven't updated the map, and it's sort of frustrating, right? Because I'd really like to know when I took a snapshot of this. This was overnight last night, and yeah, I do know that there was a couple fires like about 5 or 10 miles from here now, but they're small ones. So, fingers crossed.
Okay, good luck with that.
But yeah, it feels like it's midnight outside though. I just looked out the window and it really is just dark. It's kind of spooky.
Oh gosh.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, I think our next interviewee is probably here right now. Eric, are you there?
Yes. Hello.
Excellent. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. So, you know, I think we're switching gears now a little bit here on the presentation day. We're going to start talking about HFA for the remainder of the program, which is great. You know, in fact, I think we're going to be sort of interviewing the guys who created it coming up very soon as well, which is going to be really exciting.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. But I have some questions for you now. As HFA has evolved over the years, right, and we have things like CETA Faster. For people who don't know what it is, do you want to just sort of start and explain what it's all about?
Sure, yeah. CETA Faster is the latest iteration of the CETA algorithm, which is the way that we run the visual field test. CETA has been around for a decade or so, and it started out with CETA Standard, which was the thresholding algorithm that is very smart and efficient in the way that it runs. Kind of turned the corner on how you do thresholding in visual fields. One of the reasons that HFA has really set us apart as the leader in visual field testing. So through the years, we've been iterating with continuous innovation on various parts of the visual field testing, especially the CETA algorithm. We started out with CETA Standard, and then we came out with CETA Fast, which was a variation on the CETA that reduced the testing time. CETA Faster came out in 2017, and it's the latest iteration that reduces testing time while retaining the thresholding accuracy. And that's very important. Two very important parts to visual field testing is the reducing testing time. Any practice that you go into would say, please reduce the testing time. Patients don't really like the test, and we want to get patients through faster. But they don't want to give up the information. So that was really important for us. And CETA Faster really achieves that.
Right. And I put up on the screen here, it says CETA Faster tests in about 2 minutes or less without compromise.
Yeah, if you just advance one spot there, it actually has been shown to reduce the testing time by 50% over CETA Standard. So testing basically half the time as CETA Standard and 30% faster than CETA Fast, while retaining the threshold quality. We made modifications to the CETA algorithm. So it's still the same CETA algorithm, but just faster in the test time. In fact, there was a paper that was published recently. Anders Hale was the lead investigator. It was a multi-site study that compared CETA Standard, Fast, and Faster in reproducibility and test time. If you just advance one more, the conclusions were that the three algorithms gave very similar results while reducing the test time significantly. And that's important because, from like sort of normal vision to mid defect, you get very, very similar accuracy, retest variability with CETA Faster, Fast, and Standard. And so that's the part of the curve that you really want to monitor patients. Once they get into the deeper defects, they're progressing in glaucoma. CETA Standard is the most accurate, but it's still CETA Faster still compares very well.
Right, and you can see up on the screen right now this new pattern, this 24-2C pattern. Can you speak a little bit about that and what that's all about?
Yeah, that in the following year, we introduced the 24-2C pattern, which is a hybrid pattern of the 24-2 plus 10 additional test points in the central 10 degrees. And those were picked from the 10-2 pattern. They weren't just randomly picked. They were very specifically picked for two reasons. One, to how closely they came to the nerve fiber bundle patterns physiologically. And second, the frequency of flagging in glaucoma cases. So we did a review of glaucoma cases and picked the points that flagged most commonly in glaucoma cases. So we end up with this 24-2C pattern. So this is really a nice hybrid because sometimes you want more information in the central 10 degrees, but you don't want to give up that what you're getting from the central 30 degrees. So you don't want to just do a 10-2 test because that's a very long and kind of intense test for a lot of patients. So this gives you more information in the central 10 degrees while still retaining all the 24-2 pattern. It runs with CETA Faster right now. And so the test time is still very, very short. It's about the same as a 24-2 CETA Fast test right now.
Right. And this may sound like kind of a dumb question, but I come from a place of ignorance as always. If you have an older HFA and you've been just doing CETA Standard for all these years, suddenly you upgrade to the newest device and you're doing faster. How do you compare the data between the two?
Yeah, well, we make sure that data compatibility and data history is always maintained with the HFA. That's really important for progression analysis. And so all the information from the HFA2 and HFA2Is can be ported into the HFA3 and used in the GPA analysis, the glaucoma progression analysis.
Right.
And that's really important because you want to keep that patient's history and continue the progression analysis. So the 24-2s, the 30-2s can be combined with CETA standard, fast, and faster in the GPA analysis. And so you can continue the progression analysis. You can switch over the CETA faster and not lose any of that history.
Right. So what's the impact of GPA, this analysis, been on glaucoma management over the years, right? Because obviously 30 years ago, this wasn't a thing, and now
Right.
suddenly we have this. So what's it really, over that period of time, what's changed with management?
Well, GPA has two components to it that are really important for doctors to use in the analysis. One is a global trend of the visual field. That's our VFI, the visual field index is like MD, but it's more center weighted to accommodate for the ganglion cells. And so it's a global visual field trend that shows the trending of the patient over time. And then the point-wise threshold data, if you go to the next slide, that'll give you a little bit more information about the GPA. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, the animation got a little screwed up there. Sorry. There you go. That's good. So the top line is the visual field index trend progression. And so you can see that it trends the tests, and it actually extrapolates for the next 5 years. So it's a really good communication vehicle for the doctor to the patient, especially to say, here's your trend line and here's where you're headed. And it's also a good decision-making tool for the doctor about how aggressive to be with their therapeutic interventions. And then, so that's the global trend. That's how the overall visual field is going. Down in the lower right corner is the glaucoma change probability map, and that is a point-wise assessment of every point and how it's changing from one test to the other. And so it flags very localized defects in how they're changing and how fast they're progressing. And that's really important information because it takes a little bit of time to affect the overall visual field. This way a doctor can see localized defect change very quickly from one test to the other. So those are the two parts of the GPA that are really important for the doctor to get. All this information's in the single field analysis, but if you lay them all out on a table in front of you, it's really difficult to try to mentally see what's going on, where GPA just does the calculation for you automatically in a statistically significant way.
Right. Yep, so that definitely makes it easier, right? Because the amount of data that these devices are putting out these days is just so huge, it's hard for an individual to actually keep up with all of it.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to be easy, but then you start looking at one point and another, and pretty soon your eyes go cross-eyed and
Right.
you're trying to figure out what's going on.
Right. So, we've been talking a lot today, and a lot of the lectures have been talking about getting back to work and sort of the new normal and trying to get back in the groove again. So what have you seen from doctors who are taking fields? What are they doing sort of as part of their new normal?
Yeah, well, a lot of interest in CETA faster because trying to find ways to get patients through the office more efficiently and safely while retaining all the information that you do. There's no point doing a visual field if you're not going to get the information out of it. So CETA faster has really been a way that practices have been turning to getting patients through more quickly, getting more patients through the practice because they've actually been able to add additional test slots to their schedule with CETA faster when transitioning from something like CETA standard. So that's one thing that they've been doing is looking at different ways to run the tests. Of course, right when the pandemic really hit, people were really concerned about whether they could use the visual field instrument or not,
Right.
Whether they could even use the bowl, how dangerous was it, how can they clean it? And we very quickly realized that we needed to have a bowl cleaning procedure. We had always said, don't wipe the bowl because it's a reflective surface and you don't want to mess up the results of the test. We came up with a bowl cleaning procedure where you spray alcohol into the bowl, let it air dry. Customers have been very satisfied with that. It's a very quick procedure. It's kind of low tech, but it's a very quick and easy procedure for the technician to do between each patient test. And so we put out a guidance document, a video on our website very quickly to respond to the need for how to get back to visual field testing. That was probably the most significant thing that we did. Once we put that out, My phone was ringing off the hook for a while there, and then that really died down to, just like, oh, you got this document, great, please send it to me. Social distancing has been a big thing, so we have a procedure for setting up a monitor connected by a cable, so you can set the visual field up from further than 6 feet away, so the technician can run it, see the screen, monitor the test, while also visually being able to see the patient, but not being right next to them. And then for practices that want to have the closer contact but still be safe, we have breast shields that can be added to the instrument to keep the patient and the technician separated by a breast shield. We have those for pretty much all of our major instruments now. And that was, again, a very quick response that we put out, these breast shields. And so those are available for people to use.
Great.
So with all that, I think the sense that I get from talking to customers is that people are, getting back to work now in various different parts of the country as things open back up again. Their whole practice has been turned upside down with all the procedures they have to do, the personal protective equipment and the temperature scans and patients waiting in the car and stuff like that. But the visual field testing has remained as part of their practice, and people tell me that they're just kind of getting back to work with it.
Yep, absolutely. And this is probably a good point to mention the Med Support Now page, right? So I'll just pull it up for people one more time. So some of the documents that you mentioned, I imagine, are here on this site as well?
Yes. Documents, videos, references to ordering information, all that's on the pages there.
Great.
Yeah, it's quite comprehensive. It's all for the diagnostic products. There's also, the lasers and the microscopes has a section there as well. So that site is very comprehensive for all ZEISS products.
Right. So if everyone can't remember the URL, just type Med Support Now ZEISS into Google and it will take you here.
Great.
All right. Well, Eric, thanks so much for being here today. I think we learned a lot, and we're actually going to play a little movie about HFA later as well. The 6-minute long video that you guys made, just telling people about CETA faster. So we're going to probably put that on later too. So that should
excellent. Great. Well, thank you very much. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks. Bye. Okay. So, Chris, I think that we have something coming up very soon, don't we?
Yes, we have something very, very interesting. I'm quite proud, actually, I would say, to interview both Mike Patella and Anders Hale, who obviously have been responsible for bringing us the Humphrey visual field as we know it now, and I'm very interested in what they have to say.
Excellent. And I don't know if Anders is here yet or if he's going to make it or not. Hopefully he'll make it. I'm just checking in here to see, because it would be great to have both of them here. It's very rare that you actually get to speak to people who have invented something that has impacted so many people's lives, right? I mean, you think about the vision that their invention has saved over the years. It's kind of astounding.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think we may have Mike Patella already here. I think.
Let's see.
Yes.
Hi, hello. So, hi. First of all, I understand you're in California as well, aren't you?
I'm in California. Yes.
So how are things where you are?
We have had red skies from fire smoke for the last 2 days, and it's when you mix that in with loss of electrical power periodically, it's been a trying summer.
Gosh, yeah, that sounds.
We have a very famous electrical supply company called PG&E, which turns out is the only company in the United States that routinely shuts off the power for its customers.
Well, I'll do you just one better. So we took lessons from California up here in Oregon, because our power companies started doing it too, just to prevent everything from burning down. So I think unfortunately we took that lesson from California.
Listen and learn.
I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows Mike Patella, and the interesting thing is, for people who don't know, is the extent of Mike's CV. You can see meteorology there and working for NASA, and then helping invent the Humphrey field analyzer. So how were you able to do all that, actually? That's my first question.
By never sleeping, I think. The NASA stuff happened right after I got out of the military, where I was a weather officer, and I was working for them as a meteorologist on something called the Skylab program. And that wasn't enough work, so they gave me work as a systems engineer, which was something I had done before I went to the military. The Humphrey instrument stuff started as I entered optometry school after finishing all that segment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was Bill Humphrey's lab rat for a number of years.
And I think we have Anders Hale as well.
Yes, you
Hi,
do.
hello.
Hello.
So far nearer to me, actually, further away from California. Are you in Malmo, Anders?
What did you say?
Are you in Malmo now?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm in my summer house.
Yes, okay.
But I'm in Sweden. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So obviously, again, everyone knows Anders Hale, who's been involved, I think, with perimetry since 1977 with your PhD. So a very long time ago, getting involved and obviously being instrumental with CETA. The first question I have, obviously, for both of you is about the revision of the book. What do you feel started? What was the impetus in changing and revising the book? So, what do you think are the changes that have happened in glaucoma management?
A number of factors. For one thing, we published the most recent edition in 2012, and in ensuing 8 years, our thinking has changed considerably, and the advice we would give today is different from the advice in 2012. And the literature has grown. There are other people around the world that have published and worked, and so that book needs to be current and keep up with current thought. The other thing is that Anders and I and Boel Bengtson built CETA faster, and that changes the kind of advice that we would give today compared to 2012. The third thing is that Anders has invented and described and uses a very nice way of using rates of parametric progression in glaucoma patients to choose target pressures. A logical way of doing that rather than just guessing, as most of us do these days. The glaucoma workplace that ZEISS has built has come of age. It really has become a very useful tool clinically, and we wanted to talk about that in this book. And the last thing is that we decided we wanted to point the book better at residents and optometry students. And before this edition, the new edition coming out, the book had been targeted at practitioners, and we could assume things that practitioners should know and do know, didn't have to explain those things. And for students and for residents, we do.
Okay, no, that's brilliant. Obviously, many things, as you said, have come of age with the glaucoma workplace, and also the integration of all the information we have, the OCT and its relationship to the visual fields. I think that has made a huge difference. Now, in as far as CETA faster, do you feel that sort of everyone should go there, or so all practices should actually change and shift to CETA faster?
I think that most users will probably benefit from switching over to CETA faster. And the patients would certainly benefit if we use the shortened test time to increase the frequency of testing. We all know that many glaucoma guidelines, for instance, the European Glaucoma Society guidelines, recommend rather frequent testing the first few years after diagnosis and after radical shifts of therapy. We know that most practitioners or glaucoma specialists agree on the soundness of those recommendations, but there is a lack of resources, and generally I do not think that those recommendations of frequent testing are followed in most countries. And that was the main impetus for us to develop ZETA Faster, because we think it's very important to have enough data points. And many years can be lost in not being able to see serious progression or calculating rate of regression if we not test often enough, at least twice per year, we would say, the first years, or the European recommendations, of course, are 3 times per year.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying actually to do 3 for the first year, and then try to do 2 for the next if there's progression. Where do you feel that the 24C strategy fits in all this? Would you again recommend that people are doing that as a baseline test, or would you keep it for a select population?
The 24-2C is a good addition to the test point patterns because it allows more higher spatial resolution in the center of the field, where early field loss is very common, as we have known for 30, 40, 50 years. We do not use that as a standard test, because most of the time the 24-2 is just enough. I think that the obvious place for 24-2C is if you have a normal 24-2, but there's something else that suggests that maybe this eye is abnormal. If the OCT has some signals or the disc looks suspicious and so on. In those cases, it's an excellent choice, I think. But generally speaking, we do 99% of our fields with 24-2.
Okay, brilliant.
I might add that the ZETA Faster has made use of the 24-2C practical, which is to say a ZETA Faster 24-2C can be done in less testing time than a ZETA Fast 24-2. So it's within reach clinically.
Yes,
I think that Mike has some additional thoughts on when one should switch to ZETA Faster.
Of course, I hang out with glaucoma specialists, and a lot of them have asked me, should I switch? And that prompts a few questions. Are you getting all the recommended testing in from most or all of your patients, or is your practice already able to follow the guidelines for frequency of testing? The second question is your staff happy with doing perimetry in your clinic? And the third question is, are your patients happy to do all the visual field tests that you believe is necessary? And if any of the answers are no, then I say, look, you're using ZETA Standard maybe, and maybe that's, according to the literature, maybe 5% better than ZETA Fast. It's better to use ZETA Faster and get the data than not have the data. And I think most people walk away and start using ZETA Faster.
Excellent.
And I would like to come up with something which is important, that ZETA Faster is a replacement for ZETA Fast. So if one is already a ZETA Fast user, there is no reason not to change unless you don't have an HFA3. Because if you have an older instrument, you might not be able to do ZETA Faster.
Good. Where do you feel also that the improvements in as far as the GPA are heading now? And do you feel that this allows us to sort of change the baseline or re-establish baselines?
Well, I think that the usage of the glaucoma workplace is a big improvement compared to having only your results on paper. It is easy to change baselines. You can do consecutive regression lines. And now with the new programming, we can freely intermix ZETA strategies, standard, fast, and faster. The VFI indexing is constructed in such a way that That has been possible for a long time, but it wasn't implemented until 2 years ago. And then we recalculated the change limits for glaucoma change probability maps from algorithm to algorithm. So that is also updated now. So that makes it easy to use older data. Before it was very odd that you could have one graph where you had zeta standard only and one with zeta fast and so on. But it has now finally been done in an optimal way, I think.
Yeah, you can actually select that, can't you? You can actually select to cover your mixed so you can compare previous testing.
That's really a recommendation.
Yeah, that's very useful.
Yeah, the other advantage of this updated progression analysis is simply that between that and Glaucoma Workplace, it's now easy to do progression analysis. It's available, it's quick, you can see it immediately, and it's really important that doctors use progression analysis because I can't see things that the GPA tells me, and Anders and I invented this thing, so we know it pretty well. But it really is informative to use progression analysis when managing glaucoma patients, not only to see progression, but to see rate of progression. So you can pick
exactly. I find that that's very important as well, especially in the context of a sort of semi-virtual clinic. There are things that obviously one, even however experienced one is, just flipping through fields or even electronically looking at them without any gauge for any trend for progression, that can be. You can have a false sense of security sometimes. However good you are, you may be missing things, I think. So
we've written a paper on that. And
I certainly made that experience in 2006 when we tested the first GPA, and I realized that my patients weren't doing nearly as well as I thought.
Yes. So if you've been involved with all this from day one. So looking back at the development of perimetry and how this has changed over the years, what do you think are sort of the lessons that we have learned, especially given the sort of reliability indexes and how these are managed?
Maybe you should answer this, Mike.
Well, there are two questions there, and let's take the reliability index question first. As Anders is fond of saying, the most unreliable metric produced by the HFA are metrics. The most unreliable metrics are the reliability indices. So they're just not that. We're not happy with where we are with the reliability indices. Anders Hale is now telling users of the HFA to stop using the Hale-Krakow fixation method. So his name is on it, and he's telling us to use the gaze tracker, and is telling us that if you don't have a gaze tracker on your perimeter, using the video eye monitor for a few seconds is better than the Hale-Krakow method. Second one, false negatives. When we built CETA 20 years ago, we took our best shot at improving the false negative catch trials by only doing false negative catch trials in relatively normal areas of the visual field. That did not fix the issue, and false negatives are still a much better indicator of the stage of glaucomatous field loss than they are of patient reliability. Mm-hmm. And the last one is the false positives. We have learned in the process of building CETA faster, we learned that different strategies have different false positive rates just because of pacing and test length and alertness and other details. So we now argue that the false positive index is just one thing to look at, and we do not advocate discarding tests simply because the false positive rates are a bit high. We would suggest you use the false positive rate as an alert that you should look more closely at other signs. And if you're not familiar with those other signs, they're in our book. And in fact, they've been in the last several books. So any of the last several books we've written will tell you how to look for false positive responses, in addition to just looking at false positive rates.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's that. Anders might want to talk about the lessons we have learned over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, one of those, of course, is that one shouldn't ask for permission. And in the beginning, we were rather free to do whatever we wanted because nobody thought that the HFA was any important in the company and so on. And we, in the 80s, we could really move very, very quickly. And then we have learned, of course, that one should be persistent. We have now worked together on this for 38 years, and we haven't given up yet, even if we will have to give up in the future. We've also learned that it's very important to work in groups and to have good people working with you, but also that those groups shouldn't be too large and bureaucracy should always be kept as small as possible. We've also learned that if we contact our colleagues and want to do research with them, we have usually been helped in a very good way.
That's brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very, very much to both of you. Obviously, it has been a great honor for me personally. And we have, let's see if Adam is still there.
I'm still here.
Okay, so thank you very much both to Dr. Mike Patella and to Prof. Anders Hale for all their insight into this magnificent tool that we all have learned to use and trust over the years. So Mike, what do you have for us in store now?
Well, if we told you that, we'd have to have you shot.
Okay, good. And how about you, Anders?
Well, Mike and I and Professor Bengtsson work together, and we all share the same secrets, and they are secrets.
So, okay, I have to be shot then.
But there are some things going on.
Brilliant. Okay. Adam, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, brilliant. In one piece, I hope.
Yeah, still in one piece. Yep. So thanks to both of you. This has actually been really great. This is it's sort of like a living piece of history here. It's very rare that we actually get to do this.
I hope you don't stuff us too soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Ciao.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
All righty. So we have one more interview coming up right very soon with Zach, if he is here. Zach, are you here?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Hey, good to see you, Zach.
How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. So Zach, we're going to talk to you today about the glaucoma workplace, and people have mentioned it over and over and over again today. So good to finally get you here to sort of put some closure around it so you can really describe the product to people. We've only mentioned it obliquely all day, but maybe you can give us a little overview about what it's all about.
For sure. So in a nutshell, Glaucoma Workplace is our multimodality glaucoma management solution. So it brings together all of the key diagnostic data into one place and intuitively arranges it such that clinicians can be more effective and a lot faster when diagnosing and treating glaucoma. So it's really a great new interface for all the data you're used to looking at.
Right. Now, I have it up on the screen here so people can kind of get a view of the report there. Now, the big question, of course, I'm sure people are asking is, how the heck do you actually get all of this stuff together into one report? Mechanistically, how does this all work?
Yeah, so in Glaucoma Workplace, we have what's called, and what's shown on that screenshot there, what is the structure function guided progression analysis, GPA for short, preset. So what it does, it takes all the longitudinal patient data and integrates it into the same display. So this includes OCT, visual fields, fundus images, IOP, everything, and it's all into one fully interactive display. So as you'll see, let's see, can we close up on the... Hello?
Yep, still here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so as you'll see, there's two main sections. At the top, we have the trend analysis plots. So it shows all the progression over time. And then at the bottom, we have the event analysis maps where we have the progression from baseline. So you get to see everything in one shot and everything's linked by time. So as you'll see, everything's arranged into columns. So between a user-generated date range, everything will be correlated for you. So you don't have to look between reports, flip around and say, okay, for which day is this visual fields and which day is OCT? It's all done for you. So in one shot, you see everything you need to see super intuitively.
So how does this work? So let's say you have a ZEISS. How does it actually snag the data from the device and get it into this report? Does this run on like a server that's standalone in your office? How does this all work?
Yeah, so this is built on top of Forum. So if you have all of your instruments linked to Forum, the data will automatically be sent. So then that way, when you get to the lane, all the patient data will actually be pre-calculated and ready to go for you. So the instruments send it straight into Forum, and then we do all the processing in Glaucoma Workplace.
Got it. So Forum has, you basically have a standalone server in your office, right? So the device shoots it over to Forum, then your software does this manipulation automatically to get all this data in order for you, so you don't have to do anything manually.
Yep. And when it's networked with the work list, the DICOM work list, everything will actually be pre-calculated. So the new exam is the only thing that has to be calculated, so it's super fast and ready to go for you.
Wow. So that's pretty impressive. And so I put up on the screen right now so people can see sort of a progression summary. So this is a very high-level overview.
Yeah, so the progression summary is our latest workflow tool. So what it does is it just offers a quick at-a-glance view of the patient's detected progression. So we have these little colored check marks that show where progression has been detected. So you have your patient in the lane, you can say, okay, how did they have progression as compared to last time, yes or no? And then at the bottom, we also show their most recent IOP and the change from the last exam. But where it's really valuable is we have the two buttons at the bottom that show View OD, View OS. And when you click on that, it will actually pre-configure the structure function GPA screen, the one we saw previously, to show you only the metrics where progression has been detected.
Wow.
So let's see. Yeah.
That's crazy. So Chris, if you're still there, I have a question for you. How on earth did you actually deal with all this data before tools like this that puts everything together for you?
I mean, that's a very good question. Well, obviously, previously it was paper, so you have to flick through your notes. You have to flick through your OCT scans and then your visual fields, and then try to match them together in your mind, trying to sort of using your mind's eye to sort of do the trend analysis yourself. Hasn't always been very successful from my experience. And then obviously, even when we start having OCTs and having printouts of the OCTs, again, I mean, in our practice years ago, there used to be again printed and they were added to the case notes, so paper notes. So you flick through OCT scans, and then maybe one was missing, maybe you couldn't see it at the time. So that has been, I don't think it has been a very safe practice sometimes, to be honest. But obviously now with the availability of this, not just online, but actually correlating the data, having your GPA, your progression analysis, being able to sort of extrapolate and make all future prediction has made a huge difference, not only, as I mentioned previously, in providing safety, especially when you're doing virtual patient reviews, which can be difficult sometimes because you don't have the patient in front of you, and sometimes you feel you may be missing things. So it gives you an added confidence, but also I find it very useful when the patient's in the practice. You can actually educate them and show them how the disease is progressing or how the disease is stable. So it has been very, very useful to get all the data in one place.
Absolutely. Wow. And I guess the other question, just from looking at this, we can see the devices that it's pulling from here. In general, I mean, Zach, what does this work with? What does Forum work with in terms of the instruments that you can use?
Yeah, so Forum takes in all DICOM data from, even third-party OCTs, fundus cameras, all kinds of reports it can accept as well. But for Glaucoma Workplace, it is for the ZEISS instruments. So ZEISS, all generations of ZEISS are compatible. And what's great is you can actually use all of them. So if you have a 5,000 and a 6,000, you can actually use all of the exams in the same GPA series. So you do get full data continuity. For HFA, it's a similar story. HFA 2I and 3 are supported, and you can actually mix exams between devices and ZEISS strategies and test patterns, and we make them all comparable in Glaucoma Workplace. So for example, if you have a 24-2 ZEISS standard exam from an HFA 2I, It can be used in the same GPA series as 24-2C, CETA Faster exam from the HFA3, and it's all comparable. And for fundus data, it's as simple as any DICOM compatible fundus camera. Could be a Claris, could be a third-party camera, anything should be supported.
Excellent. And I learned something actually about Forum and Workplace that I didn't even think about until last time we spoke. The fact is that you have this data going over to a different system, to a standalone server that can then be backed up on its own, versus the the bad old-fashioned way of backing up each device individually. So this can serve sort of as a central repository that's much easier to back up in case of disaster as well.
For sure.
Excellent. All right. Well, Zach, thank you so much for walking us through this today. What if people want to actually implement this in their practice? What do they have to do?
So they just have to reach out to their local Forum sales representative, and they can give them all the information on what they'll need in terms of server, and then with their instruments, what their capabilities they can get with the workplaces.
Excellent. All right, Zach. Well, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Excellent. Adam, the last slide you had before with the where you had the summary. No, you had, so that is new, and that also has been very useful as far as some of the trainees are concerned, because you can also have a quick look at this, because sometimes one can feel that there is a lot of data. So actually this with a tick box can be very useful, when you're looking at patients at a quick glance.
Yeah, I would imagine for a student, this would be a fantastic tool to just run through patient records, right? Because you could look at the check mark, see what's wrong, and then just go reference the images and take a look and see, and really learn, what's normal and what's not.
Excellent.
Neat stuff. Okay. So I think we are down to our last interviewee.
Yes, I see Javier Moreno here already.
Let's see.
So, hello, Javier. Can you hear me?
Nope. Javier, you're muted. You just want to hit the mute button, and away we'll go. Maybe Antonio can unmute him.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. A pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for being here virtually with us. Obviously, Dr. Moreno is a very well published glaucoma specialist, and again working still from Navarra, if I'm correct. Yes.
Yes.
From the University of Navarra. Brilliant.
The University of Navarra. Yes.
Excellent. So. The first thing, obviously, we've been talking about the glaucoma workplace in quite detail. How do you feel that this is helping you? Do you feel that this is helping sort of educate patients a bit better than we used to?
I think that many patients are unaware about the severity of the glaucomatous damage. The Forum software makes it easier for me to show the patient the damage. Normally, patients do not understand the structural damage because it's not easier. It's not easy for them to know what is the red color or the other areas around of the optic nerve or the ganglion cell analysis. But I think that is very clear for the patient, the visual field analysis, because the visual field is the area of the vision of the patient, and the patient can understand that gradually is decreasing this area. I think if you have the visual field index and the rate of progression, especially this progression line, you can show to the patient if this progression is a little progression or is a dramatic progression in some cases. And also this progression line can predict what is the visual field index after 5 or after 3 years. I think that if you show this line to the patient to show the visual field, it's the patient can understand that they need to increase, for example, the compliance, or to increase the treatment, the topical drops, to use more topical drops or another, or in some cases to accept our recommendation to perform a glaucoma surgery. I think that is very useful tool to educate the patients.
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially as you talked about surgery, to get patients on board. I mean, because as you and I know very well, glaucoma is like marriage, and especially if you get to operate on someone, you're properly married to them, so they're becoming there until, you know, until the end. So it has to be, patients should be aware and should be educated, and sort of be part of the decision, really. Have you implemented virtual clinics at all, or in this sort of current sort of virtual clinics where people have the testing but not see the doctor on the day? Have you done that at all, or do you feel that this is useful?
I think that what is the useful, the visual field?
No, having a virtual review of patients using the glaucoma workplace, just looking at the data,
yes,
and sort of risk stratifying patients.
Yes, it's different. The patient, if the patient have a very in the early stages of glaucoma, or the patient has a glaucoma suspicion, is suspected glaucoma or ocular hypertension, or early stages of glaucoma. It's not the same that cases with very developed glaucoma. In cases of suspected glaucoma, I like a lot the PanoMap, because the PanoMap is the PanoMap includes in one page you have a lot of data. You have the pixel map that is very. I like the pixel map a lot because it's very intuitive. In order to know what is the area of the CD ratio and the area of the structural damage, I think that is a good test. In the same page, you can find the retinal layer fiber layer thickness, in the average, in the superior and inferior quadrant, and the ganglion cell analysis. At the same time, the optic disc, the CD ratio of the optic disc. I think that is in one page, you have a lot of data in cases of early stages of glaucoma or suspicion of glaucoma. Also, if you have a little damage in the visual field, I think that the structural and functional agreement is a good test in order to be if the agreement it's a strong agreement. In cases of the developing glaucoma, I think that is better to analyze the progression analysis, the visual field, the GPA, the glaucoma progression analysis, because you know the rate of progression in the visual field, the rate of progression, the structural damage. If all parameters are progressing, it's necessary to make clinical decision and to transmit to the patient that this glaucoma it's increasing a little bit gradually, and you need to change the treatment. I think that is not the same in different stages of glaucoma.
Yeah. Also, obviously, nowadays we have all these additional tools that we use. You know, so many different tests. Do you feel that this has led us to sort of overdiagnosing glaucoma? How often do you see us overdiagnosing the condition?
This is I see regularly patients that use topical drops because one day in the past, many years ago, little years or in some years ago, the patient has an increase in intraocular pressure, and it's important not to forget that it's very patient, or many patients are very worried about the possibility to have a glaucoma, because it's if this patient enter in the Google, say that it's a very bad disease, and that you have a lot of possibility to be blind, to different things. And I think that is not the same to have an intraocular pressure. The intraocular pressure it's only a risk factor, and is not the same that to have a glaucoma. The ocular hypertension treatment study demonstrated that only 9% of cases of ocular hypertension developed glaucoma after 5 years of follow-up. I think that before to start the treatment, it's important. I recommend it to analyze with a structural test what is the situation of the optic nerve, and before to treat, to be sure that you have that the patient have a glaucoma, because it's before to start the treatment. In many cases, I think that you can show to the patient what is the reason to start the treatment, the topical drops. The intraocular pressure is only a risk factor, and it's necessary to combine with other risk factors. Maybe the patient have pseudosfoliation, or have pigmentary dispersion syndrome, or the patient have corneal thickness, very low corneal thickness. It's different but it's not only for the intraocular pressure. I think that it's not a good idea to prescribe topical drops.
I think also it is also, no, I absolutely agree with you, because it's also a stigma for patients to have glaucoma, even if we don't see it that way, because that's what we do every day. For someone who's not evolved to this, suddenly to be told that you have a potentially blinding disease, and for their family to be sort of dragged into this, it becomes a very big issue, isn't it? Some people are very anxious about it. So we have to be very careful as far as treating the right patients at the right time, and being very clear as far as where they are in this sort of diagnosis spectrum. If it's like an early condition, or it's or it's advancing quicker. We have to be very frank, I think, but also very careful not to overtreat, because obviously that creates a burden in our clinics, doesn't it, as well?
I think that is, sorry, I think that it's important not to forget that all of topical drops have side effects. If the patient after years start with a glaucomatous damage, at least is reduced the number of years using topical drops, because start in the moment that the structural tests indicate that start the glaucoma. If you start, maybe the patient have a relative, father, sister with glaucoma. Yes, it's possible, but in my opinion, it's better to delay to initiate the treatment, because the patients, until the patient have a structural damage.
Mm-hmm. So that actually brings me to the next question, because I know you'll be talking about structure function in your talk in a few minutes. But do you find that structure function analysis can help us into diagnosing other issues, other comorbidities the patient may have, something that is not actually glaucoma? Do you find that useful?
Yes, I think that is very useful. This agreement is a very useful test to analyze this relationship between structural and functional damage. But in cases with a normal retina, and if the patient has only glaucoma, but if the patient have other pathologies, maculopathies, diabetes, or retinal disease, the agreement is weak. I think that if you analyze this structural and functional relationship, and you find that you have a weak agreement, I think that it's necessary to evaluate other causes of this disagreement. In many cases, could be another pathologies, because the old people have not only glaucomas, other pathologies, for example, maculopathy, macular degeneration, or in some cases you have a problems with the scan capture, because in some patients, for example, with different size side optic disc, different sides, or tilted optic disc, or other characteristic, or high myopia, other characteristic. Is one of the reasons to find this disagreement between structural and functional tests. I think that it's a good opportunity to evaluate this agreement. It's a good opportunity to know if the patient has other possibilities, and if you find that it's not possible to obtain or to find a good agreement, is to avoid this analysis, because it's not useful. It's not useful in the evolution or in the follow-up of the patient.
And we know sometimes also that this disagreement does exist, doesn't it, in patients even who have glaucoma, and there's nothing else. And sometimes we see that some patients have a visual field that changes that precede evidence on the OCT. Although you would expect that it would not be that way, that you have the OCT first and then you have something on the visual field. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. But you're absolutely right. You have to exclude everything else that can be a problem before, actually, especially some tricky cases, before you diagnose them on glaucoma. We know that
I think that it is true. That is not in all of cases is the structural and the functional damage are in the same moment, but it's possible. But it's not the same if you have in different zones of the visual field of the OCT damage, and after 2, 3, 6 years to start the functional damage. But in many cases, it's completely, radically different, the structural damage. If you observe, you can the retina, you can observe that this has a problem of the characteristic of this. For example, I think in my experience, it's quite problematic to obtain good structural tests in cases with very tilted optic disc, for example. But it's possible to know what is the area of the functional damage, because some years before it's there and structural damage in the same place. A little by little is gradually it's deteriorating this area in the visual field.
Yeah, it's catching up. So in your clinic on a very busy day, when you have all these sort of overwhelming information, all these different tests and scans we do nowadays, all this, let's say, an overflow of data, what do you feel is the most important parameters of software that one has to look at in the daily practice?
This is a particularly interesting question, because in a normal day we have a lot of patients in the consultancy, and it's not easy, and it's very time consuming to evaluate all of parameters, or to know all of or to check all of possible tests or analysis. I think in different stages for the evolution, the best parameters are the GPA, and for analysis in early cases, the Panomap. Are my favorite tests to evaluate the progression or evaluate in the first cases. I think that it's not necessary to check all of parameters, in my opinion. The GPA in the visual, the visual field index. I'm sorry, in the visual field, and the GPA and the visual field and the OCT are very, very necessary tools in order to make clinical decisions.
Yeah, again, I can't agree more. And also the good thing about software such as the ZEISS Workplace is that you get all that information sometimes in a simple, in a screen. You have a glance of the patient, and you can tell if something is about to go wrong, even before the patient comes in the room. You just check everything, and you can tell with quite a degree of precision, actually. what your next step is going to be, which is very, very, very useful. Really gives you a bit of confidence, I think. So I think we're approaching the end closely. So, Dr. Moreno, thank you very much for your input. I'm going back to Adam now. I think Adam still there.
It's a pleasure to collaborate with this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep. Okay. Yes, I think we are actually approaching the end. Shocking but true.
Shocking but true. Exactly.
So let me pull this up here, and I think what we just want to do is maybe just quickly run through one more time everything that's going on at the show today, so I can pull it up for people so they could see. Because again, this will, of course, be available on demand. So let me pull it up on the screen so people can get a sense of it. And you can come back to the site for right here. You can see the URL at the top and log in, and you can watch all the courses on demand. They're available now. All of these sessions will be there. And you can go take a look. The exhibit hall will still be open. You can go in and say hi and kick the tires on some equipment and take a good look at it. And even this live stream, I believe Antonio said he's going to get it, cut out the ends and put it right back in so people could watch this over and over again, should they want to. And so that's that. I had one question for you, Chris, though, before we go, because somebody asked, and Antonio passed the question on to me, and maybe you could give me some guidance and clarity. You know the eye care tonometer, right? The handheld tonometer that you can use at home?
Yes.
Yeah. So the question
Yes.
came from someone: is this useful in a virtual clinic setting? Do you find it to be a useful tool, or have you even had patients try it?
I mean, I haven't. I don't think. I mean, from my experience, it's someone using, especially, and there are other things available, other equipment available, but especially the eye care may not always be very appropriate. I think, unless. Because it can be quite sensitive in how you use it. So I don't think in the hands of a patient, especially in an older population, an elderly patient, I don't think it will be quite reliable, to be honest. There are other things that have been tried. It's measuring the intraocular pressure over the eyelids and different types of equipment available. I'm sure it will come a long way. And obviously now with COVID, it's a catalyst, isn't it? Things like that, events like this, sort of kickstart technology, get brains working. But I think for the eye care, I don't think that it will be very useful to as far as patients are concerned. On the other hand, some eye cares may in the past not have been very reliable. The latest ones are more reliable, and we do use them in our technician-led clinics, which are essentially virtual clinics. The patient comes in, has the tests, usually by nursing staff, and then we review the results online. So in that setting, where we have trained people doing it in a quick in and out fashion, people coming in, having the tests, and then obviously going home without waiting about 5 hours to see me or something, and then they get very angry when they do see me. I think in that setting, it can be very useful.
Right, because I guess these devices were sort of engineered in an era where they were intended to be used by at least semi-skilled people, right? They weren't really designed to be used by just anybody off the street. And I wonder if you're right now with COVID, the engineers are going to start thinking much more carefully about, can we actually design a reliable device to use at home?
Yeah, I mean the pressure aspect is different because it's not an anatomical test. It's not a functional test. It's purely a measurement that takes a certain amount of skill, and self-administered. I don't yet quite see it to be very reliable. But obviously, I will be proven wrong. I know.
Right. Yeah, technology keeps moving forward. It's always the first time I did an EKG on my little watch, I was just kind of shocked by it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. We talk about as no, that's not going to happen. A few months later, somebody will just prove us wrong for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris. I mean, I think we pretty much reached the end here. Again, let me just remind people about the Med Support Now page, and let me pull it up. so people can see. So all the information that you could possibly need to help your practice is at this page. So type into Google Med Support Now ZEISS, and you'll get to this page. So all the information you need about the instruments, about social distancing, where you can order things like shields and drapes. You can actually learn how to use your ZEISS remotely, which is kind of cool. They even show you which cables you need, which you can order just from anywhere. You don't need to order them from ZEISS. So, all kinds of information here. So if you take nothing else away from this today, definitely remember this page. And I think we're just about at the end. So Chris, do you have any sort of parting thoughts for us?
I like the remote ZEISS use. I like that quite a lot, really. Actually, as parting thoughts, I think people also in the States and also here in Europe, we're all in the same boat, more or less. The dangerous thing is that, but the challenging thing as well, that we're trying to manage essentially an asymptomatic disease by a different way. We have a paradigm shift in as far as how we are managing patients, trying to rationalize and treatments and risk assess patients. So I think this will be an opportunity in as far as changing the method that we're treating patients, and I think that this will filter through in our surgical treatment as well. I'm a big fan of surgical intervention in glaucoma early in the disease, obviously when that's needed. So I think that this will also help shift the way we think about the condition in general.
All right. Well, those are good parting thoughts. So again, everybody, thank you so much for being here today. This was a lot of fun. I hope you got something out of it. And, I guess I'll see everybody online. So thanks again, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam. Thank you very much.